March 25, 1988. A black Honda CRX with the license plate Lil Miss pulled out of a Colorado parking lot for the last time. Behind the wheel sat 18-year-old Lisa Marie Kimmel, a recent high school graduate heading home to Montana to see her family. She would never arrive. What happened next would haunt investigators for 14 years. Lisa simply vanished. No witnesses, no evidence, no trace of the car with that unforgettable license plate that had become her signature. Then, in June 2002, a routine arrest changed everything. A DNA sample entered into a database, triggered an alert that would send shockwaves through the Wyoming wilderness. Investigators raced to a remote property in Moneta, armed with shovels and a search warrant. What they dug up from behind a rundown house would solve one of Wyoming's most haunting cold cases and reveal the terrifying truth about what happened to the girl with the Lil Miss plates. 14 years of silence, 14 years of questions, one buried secret that would finally speak. Hit subscribe, because some mysteries stay buried until someone refuses to stop digging. Lisa Marie Kimmel was everything a small-town Montana family could be proud of. Born in July 1969, she had just graduated high school and was working her way through life with the kind of determination that made her parents beam with pride. At 18, she was responsible beyond her years, the type of young woman who called home regularly and never missed family gatherings. She had moved to Colorado for work, taking a job at Arby's while figuring out her next steps. But Montana was home, and Lisa made the drive back to Billings whenever she could to spend time with her family. It was a route she knew well, a straight shot north through Wyoming's vast empty highways. The drive typically took about 6 hours. Lisa was comfortable making it alone, her black Honda CRX, a reliable companion on those long stretches of road. That personalized license plate, Lil Miss, had become her calling card around town. Friends would spot it in parking lots and know Lisa was nearby. March 25th started like any other day at work. Normal goodbyes, normal plans. Nothing about that morning suggested it would be Lisa's last. Lisa's shift at the Colorado Arby's ended just like dozens of others before it. She clocked out, said her goodbyes, and walked to her Honda CRX in the parking lot. The March evening was cool but clear. Perfect driving weather for the journey ahead. She had made this trip to Montana so many times before that the route was practically muscle memory. Interstate 25 north, through Colorado, into Wyoming, then west toward home. Her family was expecting her that evening. Lisa was always punctual, always called if she was running late. When darkness fell and she still hadn't arrived, concern began to creep in. By midnight, that concern had turned to fear. Lisa's mother called the restaurant. Yes, Lisa had left on schedule. She called friends in Colorado. No one had seen her since work. As the hours stretched into the early morning of March 26th, the terrible realization set in. Lisa Marie Kimmel had simply vanished somewhere along that desolate stretch of Wyoming highway. The search began immediately. Lisa's route took her through some of the most isolated terrain in America. Endless miles of rolling hills, scattered ranches, and very few witnesses. Colorado authorities coordinated with Wyoming and Montana law enforcement, but the vastness of the landscape worked against them. Her car, that distinctive black Honda with the Lil Miss plates, should have been impossible to miss, yet somehow it had disappeared as completely as Lisa herself. Search crews combed the highways, checked rest stops, interviewed truck drivers. Nothing. Days turned into a week. The family's hope began to fracture as each lead turned into another dead end. Where was Lisa? What had happened to her on that familiar drive home in a landscape so open and empty? How do both a person and a car simply cease to exist? Then, on April 2nd, a fisherman near Casper, Wyoming, made a discovery that would shatter the family's remaining hope while finally providing the first piece of a horrific puzzle. Walking along the banks of the North Platte River, looking for a good fishing spot, he noticed something in the water that didn't belong, something that would transform Lisa's missing person case into something far more sinister. The body of 18-year-old Lisa Marie Kimmel was pulled from the cold waters of the North Platte River that morning. The vibrant young woman who had left Colorado with plans to see her family had been found, but the answers to what happened to her would remain buried for 14 more years. The medical examiner's findings painted a picture of unthinkable cruelty. Lisa had endured something terrible in her final days. She had been held against her will, bound, and subjected to unspeakable acts before her life was taken by blunt force trauma. The evidence showed she had been alive for days after her abduction, a detail that would haunt her family forever. But perhaps most puzzling of all, where was her car? The Honda CRX, with those memorable Lil Miss plates, had vanished as if it never existed. Without the vehicle, investigators had few leads and even fewer suspects. Lisa's case file grew thick, with tips that led nowhere and theories that couldn't be proven. The killer had made one crucial mistake, though, leaving behind evidence that would eventually seal his fate. DNA evidence was collected and preserved, waiting for technology and databases that didn't yet exist to catch up to the crime. For Lisa's family, the discovery of her body brought closure to one nightmare, but opened the door to another. Knowing what had happened to their daughter, but having no idea who was responsible or why. If you're finding this case as compelling as we are, please hit the like button and let us know in the comments what you think happened to Lisa's car during those crucial days. The discovery of Lisa's body transformed the case from a missing person investigation into a homicide. Wyoming authorities took the lead, working closely with Colorado and Montana law enforcement to piece together Lisa's final journey. Investigators immediately secured the scene along the North Platte River. The location where Lisa was found became the center of an intensive forensic examination. Every piece of physical evidence was cataloged, photographed, and preserved. The DNA evidence collected would prove crucial, though it would be years before technology caught up to the crime. The timeline was becoming clearer, but many questions remained. Lisa had left Colorado on March 25th. Her body was discovered April 2nd. The medical examiner determined she had likely been in the water for several days, meaning her ordeal had lasted longer than anyone wanted to imagine. What struck investigators immediately was the complete absence of Lisa's Honda CRX. In missing person cases, abandoned vehicles are often the first breakthrough, but Lisa's distinctive car with those Lil Miss plates had simply evaporated. This wasn't a random roadside breakdown or car accident. Someone had deliberately made that vehicle disappear. Detectives theorized that whoever took Lisa had also taken great care to hide her car. This suggested planning, local knowledge, and access to a place where a vehicle could be concealed indefinitely. The killer knew the area well enough to make both Lisa and her car vanish without a trace. The investigation cast a wide net. Detectives interviewed truck drivers who regularly traveled the Interstate 25 corridor. They spoke with gas station attendants, diner workers, and motel clerks along Lisa's route. Someone had to have seen the distinctive Honda, but memories faded quickly in a landscape where thousands of vehicles passed through daily. Several suspects emerged over the months following Lisa's discovery. Registered offenders in the area were questioned and cleared. Tips poured in from across the region. Each one followed to its conclusion. But without the car, without witnesses, and with DNA technology still in its infancy, the case began to stall. As 1988 turned into 1989, then 1990, case file grew thicker, but no closer to resolution. The investigating team changed as officers retired or transferred. New detectives inherited the case, bringing fresh eyes, but facing the same dead ends. The missing Honda became legendary among local law enforcement. The Lil Miss was a license plate that every officer in the region could recite from memory. Tips continued to trickle in over the years. Someone thought they saw the car in a field. Another claimed it was in a junkyard. But each lead evaporated under scrutiny. Lisa's family never stopped hoping for answers. They maintained contact with investigators, attended case review meetings, and kept Lisa's story alive in the media whenever possible. The anniversary of her disappearance became an annual reminder that someone was still out there, someone who knew what happened to their daughter. By the mid-1990s, DNA technology was becoming more sophisticated. The evidence collected from Lisa's case was re-examined using newer techniques, but still no matches were found. The killer's DNA profile sat in evidence lockers, waiting for the right database, the right suspect, the right moment when technology would finally catch up to justice. The breakthrough everyone was waiting for was still years away, but it was coming. In laboratories across the country, a revolutionary new system was being developed, one that would connect crimes across state lines and decades of time. So far, investigators had a victim, they had evidence, and they had a timeline, but the killer remained a ghost, and Lisa's Honda CRX remained one of Wyoming's most puzzling mysteries. What they didn't know was that 14 years later, both mysteries would be solved in the span of a single month. June 2002. 14 years had passed since Lisa Marie Kimmel disappeared on that Wyoming highway. Her case file had been reviewed countless times, but leads had long since dried up. Then, in what seemed like an unrelated incident, everything changed. Dale Wayne Eaton, a 57-year-old man living on a remote property in Moneta, Wyoming, was arrested on weapons charges. It was a routine arrest, the kind that happens thousands of times across the country every day. Eaton was processed, booked, and a DNA sample was taken as part of standard procedure. That DNA sample was entered into CODIS, the combined DNA index system that had become law enforcement's most powerful tool for connecting crimes across time and geography. It was the kind of database that didn't exist when Lisa was taken in 1988, but had since revolutionized cold case investigations. Within days, the system delivered a match that would send shockwaves through the Wyoming law enforcement community. Dale Wayne Eaton's DNA was a perfect match for the evidence collected from Lisa Marie Kimmel's body 14 years earlier. Suddenly, the ghost had a name. The faceless killer who had haunted investigators for over a decade was sitting in a Wyoming jail cell, arrested on completely unrelated charges. But this was just the beginning of what investigators would uncover. Detectives immediately began building a case against Eaton while digging into his background. What they found was a man who lived in isolation on a sprawling, unkempt property in one of Wyoming's most remote areas. His home was surrounded by junk, abandoned vehicles, and the kind of debris that accumulates when someone wants to stay hidden from the world. But it was what they couldn't see that would prove most important. In July 2002, armed with a search warrant and forensic equipment, investigators descended on Eaton's property. They knew they were looking for evidence of Lisa's time there, but what they hoped to find seemed impossible after so many years. The search team spread across the property methodically. They examined buildings, searched through debris, and used ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the surface. Hour after hour passed, with nothing significant to show for their efforts. Then, behind the main house, investigators noticed an area where the ground looked different, slightly sunken, deliberately filled. They began to dig. What they found buried in that makeshift grave would solve the 14-year mystery of Lisa's missing Honda CRX in the most dramatic way possible. There, several feet underground, perfectly preserved, and still bearing the Lil Miss license plates that had become synonymous with the case, was Lisa's black Honda CRX. The car that had vanished without a trace in 1988 had been hidden in plain sight for 14 years, buried behind the home of her killer. The discovery of Lisa's Honda CRX, buried behind Dale Wayne Eaton's house, was the final piece of evidence investigators needed. After 14 years of questions, the case against her killer was now ironclad. Forensic teams carefully excavated the vehicle, documenting every detail. The car was remarkably well preserved, and those Lil Miss plates were still clearly visible, a haunting reminder of the vibrant young woman whose life had been cut short. Inside the Honda, investigators found additional evidence linking Eaton to Lisa's final days. The burial site told its own story. This wasn't a panicked disposal of evidence. It was methodical, calculated. Eaton had taken the time to dig a proper grave for the car, suggesting he always planned to keep Lisa's Honda hidden indefinitely. The remote location of his property had provided the perfect cover for 14 years. In 2003, Dale Wayne Eaton was formally charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and first-degree homicide in Lisa's case. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA connected him to the crime. The buried car proved he had been in possession of Lisa's vehicle. His remote property explained how he had been able to hold her captive without detection. The trial revealed the full scope of Eaton's crimes. Prosecutors, painted a picture of a predator who had targeted Lisa along that isolated stretch of highway, likely forcing her off the road or luring her to stop. The evidence showed she had been held at his property for days before her life was taken. In 2004, a Wyoming jury found Dale Wayne Eaton guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to death, Wyoming's first death sentence in decades, though his sentence was later commuted to life without parole due to legal challenges. Justice had finally been served for Lisa Marie Kimmel. The case that had haunted Wyoming law enforcement for 14 years was closed. The Lil Miss plates that had become a symbol of an unsolved mystery could finally rest alongside the memory of the remarkable young woman they represented. Lisa Marie Kimmel left for Montana on March 25, 1988, expecting to spend time with her family. Instead, she encountered evil on a lonely Wyoming highway. For 14 years, her case remained one of the region's most haunting unsolved mysteries. But sometimes, justice finds a way. A routine arrest, a DNA sample, a database that didn't exist when Lisa was taken. These seemingly unconnected events converged to finally give Lisa's family the answers they had waited so long to receive. The black Honda CRX with the Lil Miss plates had been hidden just miles from where Lisa's body was discovered, buried behind the home of the man who took her life. Dale Wayne Eaton thought he had committed the perfect crime, but time and technology proved him wrong. Lisa's story reminds us that some cases are never truly cold. They're just waiting for the right moment, the right evidence, the right breakthrough to bring truth to light. Her family finally had their answers. Lisa could finally rest in peace. But across the country, thousands of other families are still waiting for their moment of justice, still hoping that somewhere, someone is working to bring their loved ones home. If this case moved you, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Check out our video on the Golden State Killer case, another cold case solved by DNA evidence decades later. Your support helps us continue telling these important stories. Some mysteries take time to solve, but they're always worth the wait.